Pedro Munhoz versus Dominick Cruz takes place this weekend in the bantamweight division, and I can't wait for this one. It's a big fight in the bantamweight division as well. Two top 10 contenders, number 8 in the world Pedro Munhoz versus number 9 in the world Dominick Cruz, and it might not seem like it at first, but there is a lot on the line in this fight. There is relevancy on the line in this fight. There is GOAT status on the line in this fight as well. If Dominick Cruz loses this one, he might be out of the running in terms of GOAT status. If, let's say, TJ Dillashaw goes on to win the belt in the bantamweight division, he'll then obviously become the GOAT, but because of maybe the EPO, you could still give it to Dominick Cruz. But right now, there's a conversation over who is the bantamweight GOAT, and I do believe that Dominick Cruz is the front runner in that conversation, and if he wins this one this weekend against Pedro Munhoz, I think he's guaranteed the bantamweight GOAT. He already is anyway, but if he loses, it doesn't look too good for him. So Dominick Cruz coming back is so respectable for me because he's not just risking losing a fight. He's got such great legacy foundations already in his career. If he loses this one to Pedro Munhoz, or loses even, let's say he lost to Casey Kenny, he would ruin his legacy for a very long, like, he would never be able to recover from that bad legacy. If he lost to a guy like Casey Kenny, gladly he got the win over Casey Kenny. I don't know what the judge was seeing to make it a split decision, but he, in my opinion, could have won every single round of that fight 3-0. At best, it was 2-1 Dominick Cruz for Casey Kenny, that is anyway. But even still, he is risking such great legacy to be ruined by coming back against these contenders. But if he beats Pedro Munhoz, he solidifies himself as the bantamweight GOAT, and also solidifies himself as a very relevant contender in the bantamweight division. There is a lot on the line here. Whoever loses might as well go home. Pedro Munhoz could try out a move down to the flyweight division if he loses, but if he does, he's going to be taking on contenders like Amir Albazi, David Dvorak, some of the top guys in the flyweight division, and he won't be putting himself right into the top 10 like Cody Garbrandt is, even though he does have a win over Cody Garbrandt. Even still, Dominick Cruz, if he loses this one, of course loses his legacy, loses a nice chance at being called the bantamweight GOAT forever, unless Piotr Jan goes on a ridiculous run right now. But even still, Dominick Cruz and Pedro Munhoz really need this win. If Dominick Cruz wins and Dillashaw gets the next title shot, because Aldo, I believe, is out for 6 months with a bad orbital bone, you could do Dominick Cruz versus Jose Aldo in the meantime for a main event of a fight night, and I honestly wouldn't mind. And think about the GOAT connotations attached to that bout. Jose Aldo versus Dominick Cruz at this point in their career, especially if Cruz does in fact get past Pedro Munhoz. And let's talk about the prediction. I do believe that Dominick Cruz will get past Pedro Munhoz this weekend, and we're going to talk about that in a second, but this fight is huge for both of them. Very dangerous for both of them as well. They have very interesting styles. It's going to be about who implements it better. And I believe Dominick Cruz is going to implement his style much better than Pedro Munhoz did. I think it's been a very long time since we've seen an active Dominick Cruz, and I'm so glad to finally see a Dominick Cruz who's not returning after a year off. Because let's not forget, against Henry Cejudo, he'd been out for ages working the commentary desk. He didn't even look in that good of shape, and he made weight on like a couple of weeks' notice to take on Henry Cejudo after Jose Aldo originally pulled out of that fight with an injury, I believe. Or something happened to make Aldo not be able to fight at that time. Maybe it was a visa issue or something like that. But Dominick Cruz stepped up on short notice. I don't really hold that against him, in all honesty. There was weirdness about the stoppage. It was an okay stoppage, but it could have been stopped a little bit earlier, in my opinion. The fact that he was getting back up towards the end of the stoppage was what made it so weird. If he would have got stopped whenever he was on the ground just getting his head punched in before he started getting back up, then I would understand it, but he was getting back up. Of course, alcohol and cigarettes is what Keith Peterson smelt like. The whole very famous interview that Dominick Cruz gave when talking about Keith Peterson. But even still, good matchup. I believe Dominick Cruz has got this one in the bag. There is a massive fight here. Massive fight here for the bantamweight division. It's on the prelims. The bantamweight GOAT, as of right now, is on the prelims of a card, and he's ranked number 9, which makes so little sense, but that's how this sport works. Also, what doesn't make sense is the only reason he's ranked number 9 is because he lost to Cody Garbrandt, and Garbrandt's done nothing but almost fucking lose every single fight he's had since fighting Dominick Cruz and beating him. So now Cruz has like been shimmied down the division as Garbrandt has moved down the division, but even still, Pedro Munhoz is below Cody Garbrandt. He beat him by first round KO. So Cody Garbrandt beat Dominick Cruz years and years ago, but has to stay above Dominick Cruz in the rankings and moves down Dominick Cruz by losing himself in his own career. But Pedro Munhoz beat Cody Garbrandt by first round KO a couple of years ago, and he's below Cody Garbrandt. Very interesting the way they do rankings. It seems to be skewed towards the people that they want to succeed rather than who is actually the better guy at the time in the division. But Dominick Cruz, I think he's got this one against Pedro Munhoz. Let me talk about why. I think he's got a nightmare style for Pedro Munhoz. I did think at first maybe Pedro Munhoz could corner him down, cut off the cage and start landing those calf kicks whenever he closes off the distance against Dominick Cruz and land those calf kicks hard, land some good body shots, land some good kicks here and there, and slowly wear down on Dominick Cruz and beat him as the rounds went on. But Dominick Cruz fought Casey Kenny, and he took some leg kicks in that bout, which is why I originally thought when this fight first got signed, Munhoz is probably going to beat Dominick Cruz. It'll be a close fight, but I can see Pedro Munhoz outlanding Dominick Cruz and doing more damage with that calf kick as the fight goes on. Kenny lost every round to Cruz, but he did land some good leg kicks. But the reason why he landed those leg kicks is because Dominick Cruz moves so much. He is a movement-heavy fighter. He's all over the place, very weird style. Herky-jerky is what's been used to describe it many times in the past. A very herky-jerky style, but it's very, very systematic, so he has it down to a T. It's not random movements out there. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's trying to set you up with. It's a system that he has of footwork that people just didn't understand back then, so they just thought it was a herky-jerky, weird style that he had. But he's a genius out there, but this is in the bigger cage. And that Casey Kenny fight was in a very small cage. And Casey Kenny is also a pressure fighter with a great chin, good submission ability if you try and take him down. We've seen he has guillotines in his career before by finish. And he's also got really good leg kicks. So, if you're looking for a warm-up fight for a Pedro Munhoz, Casey Kenny's like a knockoff version of Pedro Munhoz. And now you've got Dominick Cruz active, which is always good to see. I think he's got a good chance of doing it. Plus, you add in the big cage for him to move around in. I don't see Pedro Munhoz being able to slow him down and corner him because Aldo's not much of a mover, really. Aldo is kind of stationary in his approach to the game, and Munhoz just showed a lack of an ability to close him down. Maybe Munhoz has fallen off a little bit recently, who knows? But even against Frankie Edgar, I thought he won that fight very clearly 4-1, and should have won it, but it was one of the biggest robberies of all time. But he didn't look great against a guy like Frankie Edgar, of course. So I feel like Dominick Cruz is at that level above, where he can maybe get by in a very, very close decision against Pedro Munhoz. So I'm going to call a 29-28 decision for Dominick Cruz, winning himself the first 2 rounds, but maybe losing the 3rd round after so much movement, taking a couple of leg kicks that hurt, and eventually starting to slow down, and Pedro Munhoz maybe lands a couple of decent shots. As long as Dominick Cruz doesn't shoot himself into a guillotine here, I think he can dance around Pedro Munhoz in the bigger cage with better movement than Aldo, with more sporadic movement than Aldo, and I think he can give Pedro Munhoz a lot of problems. Let's not forget also on the stats, Dominick Cruz is way bigger than Pedro Munhoz. Munhoz should really be a flyweight, really. 5'6", 65-inch reach. Those are flyweight measurements, and even still, those aren't good flyweight measurements. 5'6", 65-inch reach. I believe that Kai Kara France has something like a 5'4" in height and 69-inch reach or something like that. So there's a lot of flyweights that are actually better dimension for that division already there than Pedro Munhoz is in the bantamweight division. But I feel like Dominick Cruz with that 3-inch reach advantage, especially because Pedro Munhoz rarely throws straight punches and Dominick Cruz is very good at straight punches. He mixes them in, he disguises them, and then he pops your head back out of nowhere and you don't even see it coming. With that reach advantage that he has, and the fact that Munhoz rarely throws at range anyway and looks for the shots on the inside with the hooks, I think Cruz has got a perfect style to deal with it. And I think Munhoz is just a little bit too stationary for him. Saw that against Aldo. Of course, now maybe he could have broken his foot against Aldo in the round because Aldo was checking those leg kicks. But I know Dominick Cruz is looking at that Aldo fight and thinking, that's how Aldo dealt with those leg kicks. If it comes to it, I'll deal with him that way as well. Dominick Cruz is a thinker in the game. And I also like the fact that he even took this fight in the first place because, you know, he's Cruz. He's a genius. And he clearly sees something in Pedro Munhoz that he can take advantage of. I really want Cruz to win. I'm worried that he might lose. I think it's going to be a very close fight. But I do reckon Dominick Cruz can keep the activity up and outland Pedro Munhoz in those first 2 rounds by being too weird, by using his footwork, by keeping his legs out of the way of those calf kicks, using the bigger cage, and using that reach advantage against Pedro Munhoz as well. Plus, he's got great cardio, always has been the distance majority of the time in his career. There was a time when he was nicknamed the Decisionator, Dominick Cruz. I think it was by Uriah Faber at the start of their rivalry that they had. But even a win over Uriah Faber, it's not a bad win. You know what I mean? Like, usually you'd look back at that last win other than Casey Kenny and think to yourself, Uriah Faber, though. You know what I mean? But Uriah Faber beat Ricky Simone. He actually had a moment of success against Petr Yan, which is more than you can say about a lot of Petr Yan opponents. But even still, before that, TJ Dillashaw, Demetrius Johnson. I mean, the names on his resume are very good. Joseph Benavidez twice. And that's when Benavidez was a monster in his own right as well. Still was towards the end of his career, but of course, a little bit older. But that's when Benavidez was in his prime at the top of the division, taking on guys like Demetrius Johnson to competitive decisions sometimes, getting KO'd on the other times as well. But still, Dominick Cruz has got a great legacy. Beating TJ Dillashaw is an incredibly good win. I thought he won that fight as well. I know some people say that Dillashaw should have won 3-2, but I thought it was Dominick Cruz very, very clearly in that one based on the first 3 rounds. And even still, in those first 3 rounds, Cruz makes it incredibly awkward for you. All over the place, weird levels of activity, and I don't think Pedro Munhoz has the head movement. I don't think he's got the straight punches. I don't think he's got the speed. He's got some power in his hands, so maybe he could drop Dominick Cruz here and there. I just don't want to see Dominick Cruz shooting takedowns, because Pedro Munhoz is very dangerous if you're shooting takedowns on him. Maybe Cruz could pull it off at the end of some of the rounds, maybe, once Pedro Munhoz is tired and they're both sweaty. Maybe at the end of the 2nd or 3rd round, he could sneak a takedown to help secure himself that round, like he did against Casey Kenny. But I do believe that Cruz is going to win this one, and if he does win this one, he is on to massive things in the bantamweight division, and let's talk about what some of those things could be. I reckon the Aldo fight is there. I think if Munhoz wins, he might still go down to the flyweight division. I mean, there's a chance he could look for like the loser of Petr Yan versus Aljo, but if I was Pedro Munhoz, I would still look towards the flyweight division, especially if Cody Garbrandt wins down there, because if you go and win down there, maybe you'll be ranked above Garbrandt in that division, then get a rematch at flyweight between Munhoz and Garbrandt for a title shot. Who knows? But if Dominick Cruz wins, it opens the Pandora's box of amazing matchups you could make in that division. Imagine Petr Yan defending his belt against Dominick Cruz. Dude, Aljo's going to beat Yan. I need to stop doing this. I feel like Aljo's... I keep saying... it's so natural for me to just spew out that Yan's going to beat Aljo, but I'm kind of worried that we're all jinxing it and he's going to win and ruin everything. That cunt! All good, though. Just pure rage left my body there. But I'm fine. Yan's going to win. Touch wood. But I feel like if Cruz wins this one, immediately, if they can't give him the Aldo fight, which I think could be a possibility, if Aldo needs more time off and he's earned his title shot, I understand he already has earned his title shot in fairness, or they could do maybe Dillashaw versus Aldo at some point next year as well. Corey Sandhagen versus Dominick Cruz. Sign me the fuck up. Any Fight Night main event, 5 rounds, and that would earn Dominick Cruz a title shot, and all of a sudden, you've got a bantamweight division in the best case scenario possible, having a top 5 of their division being named Petr Yan, Aljamain Sterling, TJ Dillashaw, Jose Aldo, and Dominick Cruz. If Cruz beats Sandhagen. I don't think he would. I think Sandhagen moves as well as Dominick Cruz and would make that really difficult for him to implement his style. But against a stationary, short-reached, bad at closing down distance, especially in a big cage Pedro Munhoz, I reckon Cruz can pick him apart for at least 2 rounds before things starts to go bad. But the one thing that I need you to mention is, or I need to mention is, I'm talking to myself here, check for the braces on the feet of Dominick Cruz, the foot wraps that he has. If he has none, we're about to see vintage Dominick Cruz. The best Dominick Cruz you've ever seen in your fucking life. Because he has tendonitis really badly in his feet. And typically, when he has those foot wraps on, his footwork is very rudimentary compared to the Cruz of old that didn't have those problems with his feet, of course, as well. Moving around on your feet that much does really affect your tendons in your feet. Of course, I used to do taekwondo, so I see a lot of these kinds of injuries on your tendons. You're always on your toes non-stop, bouncing around all over the place. A lot of people have those injuries, and you see them like massaging out the soles of their feet before they even go and train. It's really bad when you do that so much, bouncing around all over the place, and Dominick Cruz does have those problems. So, if he has no wraps on his feet, put your house on Cruz. 1 wrap on his feet, we could get interesting here. 2 wraps on his feet, live bet Munhoz as the dog. Or even though he's not the dog, because he's actually a favourite here. So I'm giving you an underdog in Dominick Cruz. Easy win. I reckon he'll get this one done. 29-28 by decision. And also, one more time, The loss to Garbrandt wasn't that bad considering he had 2 wraps on, really bad tendonitis, looked very bad out there, didn't look in the best of shape, looked like he didn't have the same movement as he used to have as well. I'm not making excuses for Dominick Cruz here. If you watch the fight, he does not look like he does in his other bouts, and maybe you could say that's because of Garbrandt, but even still, even against Garbrandt, in the fashion that he showed up in, he outlanded Garbrandt every fucking round. And that was a Garbrandt with all the confidence in the world, not worrying about getting chinned because he didn't know that he had a shit chin yet in his career, even though he did get KO'd in amateurs fucking brutally at one point, really badly out cold. Even still, he had a ton of momentum, a ton of confidence. He thought he was going to beat Dominick Cruz. Team Alpha Male had built him to beat Dominick Cruz, and he had that in his mind. But still, Dominick Cruz, on one of his worst performances, outlanded Cody Garbrandt every round and only lost because of flash knockdowns and Cody Garbrandt body popping and doing the robot. So, I think Cruz has got this one in the bag. I do believe so indeed. Neither guy has the best striking accuracy. In fact, Dominick Cruz has got 32% accuracy, but Dominick Cruz I don't think you can really use that as an assessment of how good his accuracy is because, like, he just throws shots out there just to make you think about stuff. So it's kind of hard to read his accuracy that way because you don't know what shots are even supposed to land and what shots are just supposed to set up the fucking 1-2 switch stance, shimmy to the left, now cha-cha real smooth, right hand, left hand combo. But I reckon he gets this one done. The reach, the big cage, the stationary target of Munhoz, who wings only hooks and not many straight punches. I reckon Cruz has got this one. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Click that button up there. Toodle pip. I'll see you later. Sandhagen next if he wins. You know it's a great matchup. Toodle pip.